Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arthur Aidala, and I am the managing partner of the law firm Aidala, Bertuna, and Kamins. We were the part of the trial team, and we were the appellate team. Judge Barry Kamins and Diana Fabi Sampson and myself tried the case alongside Donna Rotuno and Damon Chironis 4 years ago, more or less, right now, in this courtroom right behind us. And at the time of those rulings, from the days I interned with John Esposito in 1980 and when my father worked here in the 60s and 70s, what we knew then was the first words that came out of my mouth to the Court of Appeals, which was, from the bottom of our hearts, from our collective hundreds of years of experience, we knew that Harvey Weinstein did not get a fair trial. And there's a quote from Judith Kaye, who is one of the great leaders of this state. She was the chief of the Court of Appeals of the state of New York. And the essence of it was, there are some people who are very unpopular in our society, but we still have to apply the law fairly to them. And in this courthouse behind us at that trial, the law was not applied fairly to Harvey Weinstein. And what the Court of Appeals, the highest court in the greatest state, in the greatest country, said today is that, yes, no one is above the law, but no one is below the law either. And the case in which it relies upon is called the Molyneux case. It's over 100 years old. And what the Court of Appeals said, you can't throw out 100 years of legal precedent because someone is unpopular. We compliment the Court of Appeals for having the strength and the courage to do so. We compliment the former Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals, Chief Judge Janet DiFiore, because she's the one who gave us access to the Court of Appeals. It is not often, it is not automatic that a criminal defendant gets access to the Court of Appeals. And Chief Judge DiFiore, who's been a fighter for women's rights throughout the course of her career, stepped up and said, no, there's a problem here that my colleagues on the bench have to examine. And they did examine it. And Judge Jenny Rivera, who has spent her entire career in the law as a professor, as a judge, fighting for women's rights as hard as she possibly can, wrote this decision. And it may sound like it's an exaggeration, but it's not. Today's legal ruling is a great day for America because it instills in us the faith that there is a justice system, even though there's 100 cameras around, that a judge will sit in her chambers and look at the law and look at the precedent without fear of favor and say, I don't care who the defendant is. If it's a former president of the United States or the most storied Hollywood producer of our generation, the law applies to everyone. There was over 100-year precedent that was thrown out by the intermediary court of appellate court that said the Molyneux ruling, which is allowing people who a defendant is not charged with to come into court and testify. They said it was okay in the Harvey Weinstein case. But today, Judge Jenny Rivera, a real hero for women on this planet, said you can't convict someone based on their entire life and everything that they've done in their life. You can't allow more witnesses to come in and testify against the defendant than the defendant is actually charged with. You can't do that. What Judge Rivera wrote, over a century later, we reaffirm that no person accused of illegality may be judged on proof of uncharged crimes that serve only to establish the accused's propensity for criminal behavior. So the Court of Appeals deserves a tremendous amount of credit for doing this based on the law, not based on opinion polls, not based on popularity contests. And let me tell you something about Harvey Weinstein. From the moment I met him at his office in Midtown, he profoundly declared his innocence. He said, if you're going to represent me, you need to know I didn't rape anyone, I didn't sexually assault any of these women who I am charged with. He said the same thing to me today. He's also said the same thing to me when the verdict was read and I sat next to him and he said, Arthur, how could this happen? I'm innocent. I'm innocent. Because of this ruling, Harvey Weinstein will now be produced from where he is in upstate New York back down here to this courthouse. Obviously, there will be a new judge. There will be a new prosecutor because the former prosecutor has retired. And to her credit, Jonah Luzzi, in a very classy move for a lawyer, called and acknowledged the decision today and was very classy about that. She deserves recognition for that because that's how the justice system should work. So Harvey will be here. We will be announcing ready for trial on the first day we walk into that courtroom, because we are. And Harvey will, under this new ruling, be able to take the stand, will be able to tell his side of the story, and be very consistent with what he said all along, which is, yes, there was a sexual encounter between me and Mimi Haley, but I never forced her to do anything. In fact, 7 days after the alleged assault, we had consensual sex, which she testified to in this courthouse. So this today is not just about Harvey Weinstein, far from it. We've gotten calls from so many defense attorneys, from the greatest in terms of defense attorneys of Ron Kuby to retired judges, saying, you did a great thing for America. We did it. Diana wrote the brief with Judge Kamens. We tried the case together. I argued it. It was a group effort. Craig Rothfeld, who's been here, he's the prison consultant taking care of Harvey throughout. It's been an absolute team effort. But this was so much more than Harvey Weinstein for us and for the justice system. And we are relieved. Everyone's like, are you happy? Of course, we worked very, very hard. But we're relieved that our system of justice wasn't perverted. You know, this was a case about perversion. Well, in that courthouse at trial, the laws were perverted because there was so much pressure, because Harvey was the face of this movement, that he had to be convicted under any circumstances, even if you have to throw the rule book out the window. And luckily, the judges of the Court of Appeals of the state of New York, our highest court, said no. That perversion in the state of New York, in our criminal courts, in our justice system, will not stand. I'll take some questions.
Arthur, Jack Walford from the New York Post. 2 questions. First of all, how did Harvey react to the news? Did you tell him, and if so, what was his response to you? And secondly, what will be the logistics in terms of him moving prisons, given that he still has the Californian conviction over his head?
I never anticipated those questions, so I really don't know the answers.
Did you talk to him? Did you?
We're not in a rush. We don't come back from lunch for 15 minutes. Judge Kamens today is lecturing at the Brooklyn Bar Association. They're also having a suit drive for people who need some clothing. So I was actually in my closet picking out a couple of suits to give to charity when my wife called me, and I mistakenly didn't take her call. And then Judge Kamens called me, and we did not expect the decision to come out today. So we were in shock that the decision, first of all, came out, and then relieved by what the decision was. But we didn't hear, it's not like I could pick up the phone and call Harvey in prison until about, I think it was a little bit after 10 o'clock a.m. when I got the call, and it was Harvey. And, he just heaped praise on me and our whole team. And he said thank you more times than I could count. And I'll talk to you about how he found out in a moment. But I do want to say this about Harvey. He, after the oral arguments in the Court of Appeals, he called me. It was like a week later maybe because he wasn't able to see it right away. But eventually he saw the oral argument. And he called me and he said something that any lawyer would want to hear. He said, Arthur, no matter what the outcome is, I know that you and your team did everything you possibly could to try to save me. And no matter what the outcome is, I will never blame you. And as a lawyer who has someone's life in their hands, you can't ask for more than that. So I appreciate him saying those things. Apparently what happened was he was in the facility today. Someone just walked over to him and handed him a piece of paper. I believe it was from the Associated Press. And he said it was like 2 sentences. It just said Harvey Weinstein appeal reversed, conviction reversed. And obviously he has some friends in there now. He's like, Arthur, I've been here 4 years in prison for something I didn't do. You got to fix this. I said, Harvey, we're going to walk in there. John Esposito has been my supervisor since 1990. He said, we're going to go in there. And the first they say, Your Honor, we're ready for trial. Just, let's pick a trial date. We're ready to go.
Was he emotional? How was he?
He wasn't emotional like crying. Craig was crying. Craig was crying. Diana was very, very focused on making her cappuccino. I was a little more, I was in a little bit, I just was not expecting, we got some misinformation that there were no more decisions from the Court of Appeals coming down, so we were not prepared. But Harvey was very gracious, very grateful. He called me actually 3 times. Look, he's in a horrible place, in a horrible situation, but the human spirit is strong, and so he has done the best he can with his help and the help of Craig Rothfeld to make the best out of a horrible situation. But it is chilling when a human being who is in his early 70s now says, Arthur, I've been in jail for 4 years for something I didn't do, and what was done improperly. And that's a really, think about where we all were 4 years ago. We were in lockdown and COVID. Think about how much life has passed, and he's missed all of that, and he's got little kids.
Arthur, Corey Malas with NBC News. Just curious, explain to us, does he now get extradited to California and begin serving that 16-year sentence there? Talk to us about what happens next.
What happens next is that actual judgment from the court will be sent up to the courthouse. To the prison and to the courthouse. His case now will be redocketed like it just started from the beginning. And he will be transported down here to a facility down here yet to be determined. And we will go, it's like his case begins brand new, like those days, I guess 5 years ago, almost 6, when he was initially arrested and brought in and, we start from scratch.
So it's 100% that this will go to trial again?
Well, that is in the attorney's discretion. If they want to dismiss the case, I'm not going to object to that. But the case starts from the beginning. Hi.
Does Harvey Weinstein have any remorse or any regret?
Well, he spoke at his sentencing quite eloquently about the remorse and regret that he has that he put these women through that situation and he looked at them right in the eyes in that courtroom. But Harvey Weinstein has been very, very consistent. Mimi LA and I fooled around on, I forget what day of the week it was. She called me in the morning. This is her testimony. She called me in the morning, said, my friend's having a baby in California. Can you fly me out? He flew her out. She came back less than 10 days later. They went to dinner and they made love. And then years later, she said, well, the time we made love, that was consensual. But the 10 days before that, that wasn't consensual. And Harvey Weinstein says, no, it was consensual. And he wants to come back into the courtroom and have this team and whatever lawyers Mr. Weinstein wants to bring on, cross-examine her, fight her case. He wants to take the stand and say, look, yes, it happened. We never said it didn't happen, but I didn't sexually assault anybody. Hi.
What does this mean for Harvey's California that will be the only part of freedom?
Well, a brilliant lawyer by the name of Jennifer Bogine, who I spoke to on the way here, she's handling his California appeal. I will tell you that one of the women who testified at this trial one of those Molyneux witnesses, of which the case was reversed. She testified at this trial, not that he was charged here, but he was charged in California, and a jury heard her in California, and the jury didn't believe her and found him not guilty of that woman who helped convict him here. So when one of the Molyneux, the only Molyneux witness that was actually put to the test of being cross-examined in front of 12 jurors, those 12 citizens of the United States of America said, "We don't believe you, not guilty."
Arthur, do you think that Weinstein will go free?
I can just tell you what Jennifer Bogine, his attorney in California, told me, is that she said the appellate points in California are actually stronger than the appellate points here that we were just victorious on. I'm confident if there is a trial here in New York, Mr. Weinstein's insistence on his innocence will come forward and he would be acquitted, yes.
You said that he would take the stand. Would he take the stand?
He's been dying to tell his story from day one. And the ruling that took place in this courthouse 4 years ago, at the Court of Appeals, when we argued, one of the judges on the Court of Appeals said to the prosecutor arguing at the Court of Appeals, no one in their right mind would testify based on the ruling of what prior bad acts he could be cross-examined on. Those, in light of this Sandoval ruling, which is what a prosecutor could question a defense attorney on, judges throughout this nation are going to scale back what they allow to come into evidence, because it's a constitutional right to tell your side of the story without having so much baggage from your whole life being put on display to a jury. You're supposed to be judged on the facts of the case, not on what you did in college. Yes, ma'am.
To that point, given that there was also a Sandoval ruling in the Trump case that's happening now, how do you think this ruling affects the ongoing Trump trial?
I know that Judge Merchant is a very thoughtful man, and I am sure, I mean, he's a little busy, but people around him, I'm sure are reading this decision and taking into consideration to see whether this ruling, because this is now the law of the state of New York, whether his ruling 2 days ago regarding Sandoval and the Trump trial, whether it jives and it's appropriate. Yes, ma'am.
Last question. This is Natalie Neves, CBS News. Do you know if and when Harvey Weinstein will be transferred to California?
No. Yes, it won't be until he's finished with his business here. So, in the light most favorable to the defendant, that's what we say in the courtroom. In the light most favorable to Mr. Weinstein, he'll be brought down here. He'll be housed here somewhere, and we will go to trial, or the case will be dismissed, and then he will deal with what's going on in California.
Does he stay in prison or does he return to jail?
Oh, look, prison and jail. Look at that. I don't know. Craig will figure that out.
So I'm just trying to understand the process here. There would be no new grand jury indictment, correct?
Correct.
This all starts as if he was already arraigned, and
This all starts like he was arraigned on the grand jury indictment. It's now there's the first time there were three women. He was fully acquitted of Annabella Sciorra, so that can't be brought back. That's double jeopardy. He was acquitted of the top count against Jessica Mann. There was a lower count of Jessica Mann. I do not believe they're going to go forward on that. So it's really only Mimi Haley. So it's now a one witness, and the court says you cannot have 4 times the amount or double the amount of Molyneux witnesses. There can be no Molyneux witnesses here. And everyone should be clear that this case was decided on the law, based on a case that's over 100 years old, that has been cited thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And it was written by a judge who we have the utmost respect for, we've always had, who is really a champion of women's rights. And we only got to the Court of Appeals from the former Chief Judge, Janet DiFiore, who's another champion of women's rights. So obviously, all of us here, from Diana and my wife, who's a partner at the firm, Mary Ann Bertuna, down to my 2-year-old daughter, of course, if a woman is assaulted in any way, shape, or form, I'm the first one to go after them and take them down. But when you get into this building, the law applies to everyone, from a murder case to a falsifying business records case. So, and that's what the Court of Appeals said today, and it's a great day for the citizens of this city, the citizens of this state, the citizens for the United States of America, and to the world, because the world is watching. I got a call from my cousins in Bolognetta, Sicily, which is a town with 3,000 people in it, that it's on the news in Bolognetta, Sicily. That's how important this case is, that America will uphold the laws of this land for everyone. No one's above the law, but no one's beneath the law either.
One of the attorneys for the accusers said courts routinely admit evidence of other uncharged acts where they assist juries in understanding issues concerning intent, modus operandi, or scheme of the defendant. Where is the line where those witnesses can't be used?
So, okay, that's a great question. It's maybe a little difficult for me to answer because we did argue in front of the court for over an hour. But the bottom line is, Molyneux witnesses come in to help jurors understand what's going on or to identify someone. In this particular case, if you believed what Mimi Haley, her testimony, you didn't need any help from any of the witnesses to understand what Mr. Weinstein was trying to do. She gave a very clear narrative of her side of the story. If you believed her, he was guilty. If you didn't believe her, he's not guilty. You didn't need 4 other people who he was not charged with to help understand what sexual assault is, and that's exactly what Judge Rivera found. That the witnesses were there only to make Harvey Weinstein look bad. That's the only reason why those witnesses were admitted, to show that he's a bad guy. He was tried on his character, not on the evidence. No, this ruling says they cannot be used again.
Only for limited exceptions.
There's limited exceptions when those things can come in. Like if you don't know who someone is, there's a real ID is an issue, which it wasn't here. You could say, oh, well, someone's done this before in this particular way. They left a certain mark on the wall, and in this case, they left the mark on the wall. So therefore, you could draw the conclusion. Those issues weren't in effect here. And the Sandoval ruling was, no one has ever seen a ruling like that in the history of New York. If they had, the prosecutor would have brought it up. They were going back to the Ronald Reagan administration, bringing in things he had done, fights he had had with co-workers. He employed 10,000 people. He had a fight with 30 of them. They wanted all 30 of them to come in to talk about, oh, yeah, he yelled at me, or he called me a bad name, or he yelled at a waiter in a restaurant. The judge was like, oh, it could come in, it could come in, it could come in. And the Court of Appeals said, no. We want to encourage United States citizens to defend themselves. We want to encourage them to take the stand and tell their side of the story. This went from a he said, she said case into the trial judge eliminated the he said, and it just became she said, the charged witnesses, she said, the uncharged witnesses. It became 7 against 0 because he couldn't talk. And the court said, that's not our system of justice, and we don't care who the defendant is. We're not going to allow that to take place. We good? Thank you, everybody. Good luck with everything going on here.